Harlem had always been a place of resilience, a neighborhood scarred by hardship yet lit by the fire of survival. Its brick buildings whispered stories of jazz and struggle, of families holding tight against the crushing weight of poverty and crime. But lately, Harlem had been troubled by something far darker than crooked cops or gang wars. Something stalked its alleys, moving with the precision of a born predator. Men vanished without a trace, and whispers filled the bars and backstreets of a monster that prowled at night. Luke Cage, Harlem's own bulletproof guardian, had heard it all before. To him, monsters came in many forms. Drug lords, mercenaries, powered thugs, looking to prove a point. But this was different. The missing people weren't junkies or hustlers. They were working men, young women, even a teenager who vanished walking home from school. Cage could ignore the police brushing it off as street trouble, but he couldn't ignore Harlem's heartbeat when it faltered. Harlem was his responsibility, and when Harlem bled, so did he. The first true sign came one stormy evening when Cage found himself drawn to a commotion near Lenox Avenue. He followed the sound of twisted metal and shrieking tires until he discovered a mangled car turned on its side, the driver missing. What made Cage's skin tighten wasn't the blood. He had seen enough of that. It was the claw marks carved into the steel, deep and deliberate, like an animal had ripped the door open with ease. And the strange thing was, there weren't any tracks leading away from the wreck. Whoever or whatever had done it vanished into the night like smoke. Cage wasn't a detective, but he was no fool either. He knew the streets, he knew predators. This wasn't the work of a man desperate for money. This was the work of something primal. Miles away, the truth was already snarling in the shadows. Victor Creed, the mutant known as Sabretooth, had found new hunting grounds. For decades, Creed's existence had been defined by violence. He had spilled blood on every continent, from shadow wars for the highest bidder to personal vendettas against Wolverine and the X-Men. But this time, Creed wasn't chasing Logan. He was hunting for sport, a beast driven not by orders but by instinct. Harlem, with its density, its labyrinth of alleys and rooftops, was perfect, a jungle of concrete packed with prey. The problem for Creed was that Harlem had its own lion. Luke Cage had built his reputation on being unbreakable. Bullets bounced off him, knives shattered against his skin, and explosions barely slowed him down. Yet Cage was more than muscle and unbreakable skin. He was Harlem's conscience. He carried the weight of responsibility like Atlas carried the world. But every hero, no matter how steadfast, had doubts. Cage's were simple. Could one man truly protect a neighborhood that constantly found itself under siege? Could fists alone hold back the tide of predators? Those doubts turned heavier when he received word from a close friend, a bartender at Pop's old shop, that two regulars had gone missing after closing hours. Cage investigated the alley behind the bar and found the stench of blood mixed with wet trash. He followed the trail and found clawed brickwork, as if something had scaled the walls like an animal marking territory. That night, Cage stood under the flickering light of a street lamp, his massive frame casting a long shadow, and he muttered to himself, "Whatever's doing this, you picked the wrong neighborhood." But the wrong neighborhood was exactly what Creed wanted. He had been watching Cage, testing him. Creed's nose told him everything. Cage's scent was strong, unflinching, steady like stone. Unlike the others, this one wasn't prey, he was challenge, and for a predator like Sabretooth, challenge was the purest thrill. The streets buzzed with rumor. Some said it was a wild animal escaped from the zoo. Others said it was a mutant, maybe one of Magneto's killers. But Harlem didn't care about labels. It cared about the fear settling in the pit of its stomach. One late night, Cage walked the streets, his hood pulled low, hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets. He could feel it, the gaze, the presence. He wasn't alone. Somewhere above, claws dug into brick, yellow eyes tracked his every step, and a growl rolled low like thunder waiting to break. Sabretooth was circling, savoring the anticipation before the hunt. But Cage wasn't prey, and Harlem wasn't a jungle where predators reigned unchecked. Harlem was family, Harlem was community, and if Sabretooth thought he could turn it into a hunting ground, he was in for a brutal lesson. The clash was inevitable. Two forces born of survival, two men molded by pain and hardened by violence. One fought for dominance, the other for protection. In the alleyways where jazz once danced through the night, the echoes of a coming battle loomed heavy in the air. Sabretooth licked his fangs as he crouched, muscles coiled like a spring. Cage adjusted his shoulders, his jaw set. his fists tightening. Harlem held its breath. The predator had found his challenge. The guardian had found his monster. And soon the night would ignite with their fury. The night was damp, the rain falling in fine sheets that slicked the rooftops and left the streets gleaming under the glow of broken street lamps. Harlem was quiet, too quiet. The usual late-night chatter, the clatter of subway grates, even the hum of music leaking from bars, all of it seemed swallowed by anticipation. Something was about to happen, and Harlem felt it in its bones. Luke Cage walked with his usual calm stride, but every muscle in his body was coiled. He wasn't reckless. He had been in enough fights to know when something was coming, and right now Harlem's silence screamed danger. That was when the air split with a growl. Low, predatory, not from behind, not from above, everywhere. And then without warning, claws slashed through the dark. Sabretooth pounced from a rooftop, his body a blur of sinew and fur, his eyes burning like golden coals. The claws aimed for Cage's throat, but Cage shifted, raising his forearm just in time. The claws screeched against unbreakable skin, sparks flying as though metal had struck stone. Sabretooth snarled, his fangs flashing in frustration. "Damn, you're tougher than you smell," Creed hissed, circling back on his feet. Luke didn't flinch. He rolled his shoulders, his deep voice steady and unimpressed. "Yeah, I get that a lot. You done scratching or you got more." With a roar, Sabretooth lunged again, faster this time, claws slashing in vicious arcs meant to disembowel. Cage met him head-on, throwing a punch that cracked the air like a thunderclap. The fist connected with Creed's jaw, snapping his head sideways and sending the mutant skidding across the street into a parked car. The vehicle crumpled under the impact, its alarm wailing into the night. For most men, that blow would have ended the fight. But Sabretooth wasn't most men. With a guttural laugh, he pushed himself up, spitting blood and a tooth onto the pavement. His wounds were already knitting themselves shut. "You hit hard," he growled, licking his lips like a wolf savoring the taste of prey. "But I heal harder." Luke clenched his fists. He had fought men who could take punches, but Creed's feral grin told him this was going to be a war of attrition. The clash continued. Cage's fists swung like wrecking balls, every blow rattling the bones of anyone unlucky enough to hear it. Sabretooth ducked, slashed and countered with savage ferocity, his claws cutting through leather and steel like paper, but never Cage's skin.
Still, every slash forced Cage to adjust, every roar echoing through the alleys, a reminder that he wasn't just fighting a man, he was fighting a predator designed to kill. They crashed through storefronts, glass shattering, shelves collapsing under their fury. Sabretooth hurled Cage through a wall, but Cage burst out of the rubble with a roar, tackling Creed into the street. Cars swerved and horns blared as the two titans fought in the middle of traffic, the asphalt cracking under their weight. Cage grabbed Creed by the scruff and slammed him into the hood of a taxi, denting the metal. "This is my neighborhood," he bellowed, punching him again. The hood caved inward with each blow, but Sabretooth laughed through the hits, blood and spit flying from his mouth. "Then I'll paint it red with you," he roared back, and with a sudden burst of strength, he raked his claws into Cage's side, not cutting skin, but driving enough force to send him stumbling. Creed leapt on him, both of them crashing into an alley dumpster with a metallic explosion. Luke grunted, rolling free, but Creed was already up, his claws dripping with Cage's jacket fabric. His healing factor had erased nearly every wound, his grin wild with bloodlust. "You can't stop me, Cage," he taunted. "I'll keep coming back and back and back until I gut you." Luke steadied himself, breathing heavy but unbroken. His voice was cold, deliberate. "Yeah, then I just gotta hit you harder than you can heal." The fight escalated. Cage caught Creed mid-pounce and slammed him into the ground with a spine-cracking suplex. The impact left a crater in the asphalt. Sabretooth howled, stunned for a moment, and Cage seized the chance. He pummeled him, each strike shaking the ground, until even Creed's healing factor struggled to keep up. But Creed was nothing if not relentless. With a final surge, he sank his claws deep into the street and used them as leverage to flip Cage onto his back. Straddling him, Creed raised both hands, claws gleaming in the dim light. "This is where you die," he roared. But Cage's hand shot up, grabbing both of Creed's wrists mid-swing. His grip was like iron. With a roar that echoed down the block, Cage forced Creed's arms outward, then drove his unbreakable forehead straight into Sabretooth's face. The crack was sickening, and Creed reeled, dazed. Luke didn't stop. He surged to his feet, lifted Creed high over his head, and with all the power Harlem had ever given him, he brought Sabretooth down in a bone-shattering slam onto the pavement. The ground split, dust and debris rising like smoke. This time Creed didn't get up. His body twitched, bones broken, his healing factor struggling against the sheer trauma inflicted in seconds. His breaths came ragged, his once maniacal grin now smeared with blood and pain. Luke Cage stood over him, chest heaving, fists still tight. He looked down at Creed, then shook his head. Not in my neighborhood. With that, Cage turned and walked away, his massive frame disappearing into the shadows of Harlem streets. Behind him, Sabretooth lay broken, growling weakly, the Predator finally forced to admit defeat. Harlem was safe for now. The Guardian had stood, and the monster had fallen.